Welcome to Retro Gaming Radio. I'm Shane Armandoe, your host. Comprehensive online. Welcome to Retro Gaming Radio. Welcome to Retro Gaming Radio. Comprehensive online. I'm Shane Armandoe, your host. Welcome to the program.
Hello once again, folks. It's time for another edition of Retro Gaming Radio. I'm Shane Armandoe, your host. Welcome to the program. Well, welcome to the audio-only format of Retro Gaming Radio. I never would have suspected I'd have sold out and gone audio-only, but since I can't get a mirror, and the show must go on, the show continues in audio-only format, MP3, which should make a lot of you happy, especially the Linux people who've never wanted to install QuickTime or RealPlay or anything else to watch videos on. So we're going to move forward. The show must go on, and it shall go on in MP3 format. Speaking of MP3 format, you'll be happy to know that all episodes of the past of Retro Gaming Radio are now online and available for download in MP3 format. Thanks to Mike for providing me with EO Video, which is a useful little tool for batch converting RealPlayer, ASF, and other formats into another format. Very useful tool. With that, we've managed to move all of the shows from RealPlayer format into MP3 format relatively quickly and easily. So all the shows are now available for download. Please be kind. Do not site rape the Retro Gaming Radio page, please. One at a time, if you will. So those are all online. So you can get those anytime you feel like it. I'm really excited about that. That's sort of your Christmas present this year. Future episodes of Retro Gaming Radio will continue to be in audio-only format. Hopefully I can get these guys out a little bit quicker and a little easier. We still have a lot of good stuff planned for future episodes. We've got more interviews coming, which I can't really disclose to you just yet because I got to make sure these guys are going to do them for me. But we're going to have the return of the 8-bit flashback next episode. You're going to like that. I got some ideas already. Some very nice users have written in and told me what they'd like to see for 8-bit flashback. We're going to do an extensive coverage of CGE this year. That's the Classic Gaming Expo. For those of you who may not have been privileged to attend that last year, CGE is going to be a big hub for Retro Gaming Radio. This year we're going to actually go there to work. Hopefully, providing that I have the funds, we're going to try to set up a listening booth for Retro Gaming Radio episodes. Also, hopefully generate some interest in having people come on and interview. I'd like to have a lot more of the classic gaming programmers come on. You know, the guys that wrote like Defender for the 2600, that sort of thing. I'd like to have them come on the show and offer some of their unique insight, because when we attended last year, they had a lot of 2600 and ColecoVision programmers, and their stories were fascinating in terms of how they did things, you know, how they came across special effects that ended up being in Demon Attack, for example, which is a failed attempt at Missile Command. It's real interesting stuff, and I think that you all would enjoy it a lot. So we're going to have a lot of CGE coverage. Let's go ahead and get on with the show. This episode, we're going to have my standard editorial commentary, dubbed Whatever Happened to Gameplay. It sounds like a similar rant, but I've got some new slants to look at. We're also going to look at the first viable CD32 emulator called Project 32. The CD32 unit, of course, is the quirky, fun-loving Amiga console that should have actually been on top of the world, much like the Amiga itself, but once again was killed off by Commodore. And finally, we're going to look at Dragon's Lair. Yeah, I know you're sick of hearing about Dragon's Lair, but this is important. We're going to look at two different Dragon's Lair packages, and I know you're thinking, man, we have gone over this over and over and over again. But this is important. This time around, we're going to look at two authentic Dragon's Lair packages. Now, those of you who are big into Dragon's Lair know that to date, we have not had really an authentic Dragon's Lair. We've had some close calls, but we've never actually had the real deal. Nothing that actually felt and quite played right. Well, we've got two packages here that promise to do it. The Dragon's Lair Authentic CD-ROM from Digital Leisure, which just came out, and we have Daphne, the Laserdisc Emulation project. Which one stands the test? We're going to tell you today on Retro Gaming Radio. So stick around. Okay, let's start off with the editorial commentary. This time around, it's whatever happened to gameplay. And I know you're thinking, Shane, you've covered this before. We know what you think about today's modern games and gameplay. But I've got some interesting angles I want to look at and explain to you why I think people are starting to move in the right direction, what I think people are looking for now, and kind of give you an overview. Let's take a look at, first of all, when we're talking about gameplay, you basically got two player models you've got to work on. You've got the single player model and the multiplayer model. Now, my feelings on multiplayer games are well known to my friends and my family. But there really is a difference in the scope and execution of a game between a single player and a multiplayer game. And I'm not just talking about online games. I'm talking about all types of multiplayer games. From every other turn, you play a guy, he plays a guy, to the split-screen fragging action of Quake 3 Arena on the Dreamcast, let's say. And there's a very different paradigm in terms of how video games are being written for these two different types of platforms. It's starting to get more and more that the single-player model is of no interest to game developers. They stick all their time, money, and effort into the multiplayer model. And some companies just say, screw it, you're playing it online and that's it. Or you're playing it multiplayer and that's it. You don't want to play online with people, then you get stupid, boring-ass AI bots if you're not going to play it online. And then at the end, sometimes the company will throw together a quick little first, single-player model, which basically lacks all the ingenuity and invention that they stuffed into the multiplayer model. There's some really good examples of how this works. Quake 3 Arena is an example of a multiplayer game only. And let's face it, if you don't want to play online, Quake 3 Arena is a completely worthless game to you. On the other hand, you've got games like Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which are a much better single-player model than they are multiplayer model. Then you've got, occasionally, you get a game that does it right, which is Half-Life, from recent recollection. That not only has great multi-game play, but also has a fantastic solo-player system as well in it. But you don't see those very often, folks. Those are not the majority. Those are in the minority. And let's face it. Who wants to play online? I know a lot of you are raising your hand going, I love to play online. Well, let me tell you why I don't like to play online. There are two types of people out there, traditionally, that play online. You've got your cheaters and your lifers. The cheaters, I know you know what I'm talking about. They've got a hack code. They've exploited some little hole in the game where with 3 peon, lowly, worthless units, they come and completely annihilate your ass. Those are the cheaters. No one likes to play with cheaters. Then, you've got the lifers. The people who sit on their computers 16 hours a day playing these games, that there's no chance in hell that a standard guy who plays it an hour a night, a few hours a week, will ever have a chance against him. What's the fun in that? No one likes getting their ass totally kicked like that. So with that in mind, that keeps me away from the online gaming scene. And for those occasional games where it doesn't turn out like that, they're milking you for $10 a month. Sorry, I can't buy a gaming model where you have to pay for the software, then pay to use it. I think Microsoft loves that concept. Not only will you get you to buy it, we'll make you pay to use it. Love that. It cracks me up. So, the multiplayer model doesn't work well for me. And I know it doesn't work well for a lot of people who are in my situation that don't like the cheaters, don't like the lifers, don't like being drained out of cash every month. So, there is a definite market for the single player or multiplayer same unit kind of situation. There have been some great multiplayer games in the past. One of the games I did in another episode is Realms of Impossibility. That game epitomized the excellent two-player model, same time playing the game together on the same box. Now you could make that network play, peer-to-peer, one-on-one, and that would be an excellent multiplayer game. It's when you have to involve more than one person, or you have to allow the general public into a game, that starts getting trashed. Now, Diablo 2 is a good example of a multiplayer model because me and my friends could go adventuring. Nobody else could join our game. We were alone in the whole world, and we could do whatever we wanted. I didn't have to worry about some lifer dig-it dog coming and kicking my ass because he wanted my chainmail. Okay? So other good examples of multiplayer action were some of the original games. The original, like Doom, right? That was a lot of fun. You're running a 50-foot serial cable from your room to your brother's room and having a nice little Doom fest. Those are examples of multiplayer games that were done right. Even the original Command & Conquer was kind of fun until people started exploiting the hacks. What we need is more peer-to-peer multiplayer games. Closed games where you don't have to interact with anybody you don't want to, but you can still get a viable experience out of it. Now, of course, the single-player model works for me. I like single-player games. And in the past, we've had a lot of successful single-player games. Look at the classics. Lode Runner. There's no way you can hack a two-player model into Lode Runner. Be it on the same box, through the network, there's no way you can hack two players into Lode Runner. And Lode Runner is one of the best-selling games of all time. Why? Because it was just horribly fun, And I've reviewed Lode Runner in one of my other episodes. Look at Jumpman. Jumpman was a badass game. People have tried to remake it. People have done ports of it. It needs a new version, but you can't mess with the gameplay. Stay out of messing with the gameplay. Pac-Man, prime example of a good one-model game. Space Invaders. Damn, arcades had nothing but walls of Space Invader machines. Why? Can we be that different today than we were in the 70s? As a people, as a race, as a species. How can we be that much different? Why does it take multicolored volumetric fog, to entice a game player into buying a game or to seriously look at a game? What happened to Pac-Man? What happened to Space Invaders? These games suck the lives out of my generation and the generation before me. Nowadays it's parents getting the life sucked out of them for GameCube cartridges or GameCube CDs, $50-$60 a pop. That's just insane. I don't ever remember paying $60 for a 2600 cartridge. I remember paying like $30, but 60, come on, give me a break. So, what do I attribute to why gameplay sucks in today's modern games? It's a real easy concept to grasp. It's called engine reuse, and it kills innovation. Yeah. Microsoft says Linux kills innovation. I'm telling you that the engine reuse kills innovation. Nowadays, it's not so much what game do we want to make. It's what can we make with the Quake 2 engine? What game can we make with the Quake 3 engine? What game can we make with the Unreal engine? We're not worried about what kind of game should we make. We worry about how can we harness the technology we already have. Now, the obvious reason why this happens is people don't want development cycles. They want to slap together a new game every 6 months. And the only way to do that is to spawn off another game on the same engine. That's the standard deal. And, the real-time strategy games are no different. Red Alert was part of the Command & Conquer engine, and I think Tiberian Sun was, again, another spawn off the C&C engine. It all boils down to we want to get a game out as quick as possible. We're going to use a model that has worked in the past because we figure it'll continue to work in the future. What we are getting is a saturated game market of nothing but spawned-off engine reused games. If you go to... A lot of people ask me why I don't go to the gaming development conventions that they have like over in California. And it's very simple. I don't want to sit around listening to these stuck-up C++ programmers who believe, that all they sit around and do is talk about how they can exploit the next video card. They're not talking about making games. They're talking about multicolored volumetric fog. How can I make volumetric fog? How can I make shifting multi-velocity lighting sources? These people aren't interested in making games, folks. These people are interested in showing off and exploiting a video card technology. It's not about gameplay anymore. You know, it used to be in the old days that the box shot on the back of a gaming box, while it was a big influence on your decision whether or not to buy a game, word of mouth and playing it over at your friend's house was usually a bigger draw to you than looking at the back of the game. Why? Because games all look like crap. You know, 8-bit games, there's only so much you can do. So you're not looking for the visuals. You're looking for, is this a fun game? Am I going to enjoy this? Not, damn, look at that volumetric fog. That's really cool. No. It used to be that the only thing you had to put on the outside of the box was runs on C64, runs on Atari 800, runs on IBM PC. Now you've got to have a laundry list of what you have to have. Now, not only do you have to have a laundry list of what you have to have, but you have a laundry list of what you should have. Well, minimum game requirements, which of course are all BS. And then you've got recommended requirements, which are 3 times what the minimum recommendation. It's crazy. And you know why? It's all about being technology whores. Everybody wants to justify the $350 they just spent on a GeForce 3, so they'll go and buy a game they don't have a lot of interest in, but utilize a specially designed for GeForce 3. It's time to get rid of all this crap. It's time to go back to the basics. It's time to start thinking about, not can we make this game, but should we? Can we make volumetric fog, multicolored volumetric fog? Yeah, we can do that. But what about the game? You're just going to have somebody running around through the fog in a Quake 2 engine with volumetric fog? Yeah, great. Yeah, call me. Right? It's not about that anymore. And more companies are starting to get the hang of this. If you look at some very classic games that are coming out, or should I say future classics, like Bejeweled or Alchemy from PopCap, these guys have the right idea. I know a lot of my friends' wives that are stranded on the popcap.com site playing these frickin' little Java games. There's no volumetric fog. There's no Quake 2 engine. It's just a fun game that keeps you coming back for more. Simple, fun, a great waste of time. That's what people are getting back to. That's what my group, Dark Unicorn Productions, is trying to do. We're trying to harness the classics of the past. We're trying to harness original game ideas. Warp them into something that's playable, that's fun, and that still looks reasonably good. There's no reason to put multicolored volumetric fog in Kablooey. It's just not going to happen. So, I suggest to you, those of you out there who are developers, those of you who know developers, start getting back to the basics. Start looking at the game as a game, not as a technology demo, not as a 3D Marks, benchmarking utility. Everyone used Quake 3's demo mode Quake 2's demo mode as some sort of a video card benchmarking utility. Well, I got test demo mode. I got 98 frames per second. All right, first of all, let me level something to you. Anything above 60 frames per second, hell, everything above 30 frames per second is basically wasted, okay? If my card does 80 frames per second and yours does 120, it doesn't make any difference. Something to think about. Okay, well, I've had enough of ranting for this episode. I drug that out a lot longer than I'd planned to. Let's move along. I'd like to talk to you about the new Amiga CD32 emulator called Project 32. Now, I know a lot of you have no idea what the hell an Amiga CD32 is. I direct you to go to darkunicornproductions.com/CD32. And we're going to have this link posted with the show if you want to get a good overview of what the CD32 was. The CD32 was basically, imagine a Sega CD with 32-bit graphics, 32-bit sound, the ability to play back full motion video that didn't look like crap for those Sega CD lovers out there. Sorry, I had to get that jibe in there. That actually had some very, very nice features about it. It had a built-in 3D decoder chip, which could have basically brought Wolf 3D and all of the first-generation first-person shooters to this console long before you would have ever seen it out of Sega, which I don't think you ever did see a first-person shooter out of Sega. And I use Sega as the benchmark, folks, because they were the ones that were in direct competition with the CD32 over in Europe and here in the States. So the CD32 also had the ability to play a wide format of discs, including burns, by the way. So that should give you some idea. Not only does it have a great music player, it has a nice digital interface with shuffle the whole bit. It also played CD plus Gs, which, of course, the Sega Genesis with Sega CD did as well. But it's a very nice unit, very nice unit. It was also fully expandable into a computer. What, does it sound like Xbox? Yeah, well, the CD32 came out like in '92, folks. Once again, Microsoft innovates nothing. With the ability to plug in an external box that had hard drive, mouse, and all that other crap to plug into it, including a modem, you could easily take the CD32 from a game console to a PC to an internet box. You know, that's what I used to use my CD32 for. Was an internet box and a development box. Let's just say, like everything else that Commodore put out, it was years ahead of its time. And like everything else Commodore put out, it also suffered from crappy advertising at the hands of money-hungry executives that believed in paying themselves $7 million salaries instead of putting the money back in the company. Thank you, boys, for trashing what could have been a wonderful life. Anyway, all right, enough bashing. The CD32 is an Amiga, basically. An AGA-based Amiga. Think Amiga 1200 with a CD-ROM drive, and you've got the general idea. AGA was the next generation chipset. A lot of people out there, you probably had Amiga 500s, maybe an Amiga 2000. Those were all first generation Amigas. The second generation Amigas had what called the AGA chipset, which was a collection of two more chips that added some very, very incredible video modes and video effects that were available for AGA programmers. Now, the CD32 was indeed an AGA box with a 2-spin CD-ROM drive. So there was a lot of good potential for that. Throw in a full-motion video card, and you had the ability to play back MPEG-1 videos, including video CDs, including the Philips CDI movie library, plus some other goodies. But now imagine what that box could have done had it been given the proper time and respect. What instead it ended up being was a shovelware box. In other words, almost every game that came out for the Amiga at the time, be it the Amiga 500 or the 1200, was basically ported over to the CD32, which means you ended up with 1 megabyte games on a 650 megabyte CD. That happened a lot. But you also got some incredible gems, too, like Super Stardust, which featured real 3D rendered cutscenes, digital audio tracks, the whole ball of wax, which I'll tell you what, Super Stardust just totally stomps butt. And if you could actually sit down in front of a TV playing Super Stardust now on a CD32, you'd think you were looking at an Xbox, or you'd think you'd be looking at a PlayStation 2. I mean, it was that clean, it was that good. Now, those games were far and few between, the games that were extraordinary. But there were a lot of great games on the CD32. Things like Chaos Engine, Little Devil, I mean, there were tons of games. I mean, Super Frog. The list goes on and on. Basically, there were somewhere around 100 dedicated CD32 titles, which is just like any other orphan system, like the Atari Lynx, which I think has like 93 cartridges available. So it actually got a pretty good fill. And with a little bit of work and maybe a little expansion, you can play all Amiga titles on it too. So that's really neat. The problem is, as just like it's been for Amiga emulation, the Amiga was not a simple box. It was not a processor, RAM, and a video card thrown in a box. It was a very complex web of custom CPUs, very interesting memory addressing, very complex. In order to emulate something like that, you're not just emulating an old Z80, processor. You're emulating, up to 6 different dedicated CPUs, all with extraordinary timing issues. And when the Windows and all the other Amiga emulators out there, such as WinUAE, Fellow, they've had a very interesting task in front of them emulating this box. We're talking about a 7 megahertz machine, folks. I mean, we're not talking about something that's all-powerful and almighty when you look at it from an outside point of view. How hard can it be to emulate a 7 megahertz machine on a 1 gigahertz processor? Problem is, it wasn't just a 7 megahertz machine, folks. That's the problem. Well, CD32 added the additional overhead of some very custom CD-ROM access firmware that would allow it to play back digital video, which they called CDXL, which is basically the AVI or MPEG format for the CD32. And it was nice. I mean, there's some really killer intros out there on some CD32 titles. Gunship 2000 has a great intro. Alien Breed Tower Assault has a great intro. And even one game actually even has an MPEG intro that required the full motion card, which is cannon fodder, which you can actually download that MPEG from the CD32 zone that I gave you the address for earlier. So emulating an Amiga is a pain in the butt. How hard is it to emulate a CD32? Well, those of you, like me, who've spent extensive time trying to make UAE and Fellow run CD32 titles, knows that it's almost a pipe dream to expect the CD32 to be emulated properly. Well, Project 32 does it, folks. I wouldn't have thought it was possible, but it is. Project 32 is a German product, which means I'm going to completely obliterate everybody's name in here. The guy that made this guy is his nickname is Windows Killer. I love some of the names people come up with. Anyway, his name is I'm going to mispronounce this. Sorry in advance. Timo Wiedrich. It's German, folks. I'm not a German guy. Anyway, he put together basically a nice little front end, which shows you a shot of the CD cover and a list of the games that it supports. Project 32 is a closed emulator, closed source, of course, as well as closed model in terms of what games it'll run. If the game's not on the list, it won't run, folks. You can't just hit Roadkill and hope to load Guardian. Doesn't work. It checks the actual label of the disc, and it's got its own configuration files for each and every item. So what games does it play? Well, the list is kind of short right now, so I'm going to run through the whole thing. Alien Breed Special Edition, which comes on the same disc as Quack, by the way. Dark Seed, Deep Core, Degeneration, F-17 Challenge, Fire Force, Fly Harder, Frontier Elite 2, Global Effect, Gloom, Gunship 2000s, IK Plus, which is International Karate, folks. Gotta love that. James Pond 2, which also has a nice little full motion intro. Jungle Strike, Mean Arenas, Project X Special Edition, which comes on the same disc as F-17 Challenge. Quack, which is a great game. You haven't played Quack, folks. That's just badass. Roadkill, which I've noticed the collision detections aren't quite ready yet, but it's the closest I've ever seen somebody emulate it. UFO Enemy Unknown, which you might recognize from the PC. And Whale's Voyage from Flare. Those are the games it currently plays, but he promises a lot more coming. Now, this is basically a front end for WinUAE. Basically, it works by using pre-configured files, pre-configured config files, along with some special, it looks like maybe even a special build of UAE that he's tampered with to make it work right. Because I've never been able to get CDXL video to play right, folks. All of this is done through like a simple DAT system where he has a DAT for each game, which has a startup sequence, and it also caches certain items of the CD on the hard drive. It actually tells you how much space each one's going to use when you cache it. Nothing's over, like 0.2 megabytes, folks. You're talking like 200K. These are small. And then it launches a UAE window, which plays the game right in there. There's really no configuration needed. It's not like UAE where you're going, God, do I have to set this slider, move that button, hit that box. Not like that, folks. You pick a game, insert the CD32 disc in the drive, hit start, you're golden. So that's pretty much how it works. And I've actually tried to hack my own games in there, and he's done a pretty good job of keeping the general public out. And I understand why. He doesn't want to have to support somebody hacking a game in and then distributing the hack files, and then he has to answer for why Guardian doesn't work. That's not fair to him. So I understand that. I've actually written to him and hope that he'll let me in on the project and I can help him test games and see if I can get stuff working for him. because I have pretty much a complete collection of CD32 titles. What else does it offer? Well, the CDXL playback is cool, folks. For those of you who've never seen the intro to Gunship 2000, or you've never seen the intro to RoboCod, James Pond 2, this is revolutionary stuff. I mean, no one's been able to do this so far. This guy rocks. The other thing it does offer is joypad support, which means you can basically have a 6-button controller to use with CD32 titles. And let's be honest, a lot of games that use the CD32 pad were definitely a lot more fun to play. A single button model is kind of crappy for a lot of these more technologically advanced games. And finally, which I haven't had a chance to test yet, is the CD32, like every other console, has some non-volatile RAM where you can store saved games, etc. The CD32 had a nice interface for handling it where you could delete old ones and that sort of thing. Well, the Project 32 actually has an NVRAM editor that you can go in and remove, existing games and that sort of thing, which is really cool. Plus, I don't think there's a size limit. The CD32 had a fairly small non-volatile RAM because it didn't use removable memory cards. That came along later. But a brilliant put-together altogether for Project 32. Now, so how does it work? It promises a lot, but how does it stack up? I'll tell you. I've done a lot of work with WinUAE trying to make it run certain games. I've tried a handful of games, including Darkseed, F-17 Challenge, Gloom, Gunship 2000. What else did I try? Roadkill, Mean Arenas, Jungle Strike, Quack, Project X. And I'll tell you what, folks. Aside from Roadkill, which has some collision issues, everything I tried ran perfect. And that's amazing that he managed to pull that off. Even Gloom, which is, basically the equivalent of Wolf 3D for the CD32, even Gloom played excellent. I could turn up the settings, make it look good, and the thing still ran like a dream. Project 32 is a neat thing, folks. If you're interested, or ever was interested in CD32 emulation, whether you're interested in just seeing what the games look like, this is going to be it. So you keep an eye on this. It's at 1.0 right now. 1.1's promised soon. And I'll tell you what, we'll be following it here at Retro Gaming Radio. A big thanks to the author for actually letting me actually get to play Quack and Jungle Strike again on my PC. Appreciate that a lot. Alright, let's move on to the next segment of the show, which is going to be the last segment of the show, since we're running already past 30 minutes now, which is what I was hoping to avoid. We're going to look at Daphne versus the Dragon's Lair Authentic CD-ROM from Digital Leisure. First of all, let's look at what each one of these products is and what they promise to be. Daphne is a Laserdisc emulator for your PC. It was originally designed to act as a controller for Dragon's Lair hardware. This means that the internal controls, the internal board and PCB and all that of Dragon's Lair in an actual arcade Dragon's Lair cabinet would be replaced with a PC running Daphne, which would control the Laserdisc player and control input from the joystick and the sword button, as well as output to the score display. Well, Daphne's been out for quite a while, and it's emulated in that respect the hardware of several Laserdisc games: Dragon's Lair, Space Ace, Cliffhanger, Astron's Belt, Super Don Quixote. It's emulated a lot of this hardware. But let's face it, for you and me, who doesn't have a Dragon's Lair cab, or a Space Ace cab, or anything else, basically Daphne has been a little hacker hardware project. Recently, the Daphne team went out of their way and added MPEG playback support to Daphne, which means for the first time ever, you can actually play Dragon's Lair exactly like the arcade without a Laserdisc player, a Dragon's Lair cabinet. With the Dragon's Lair MPEGs on your hard drive and Daphne running, you are playing Dragon's Lair exactly it was intended to be played, because it's emulated. That's basically an overview of Daphne. We're going to get into some more specifics about that shortly. What is the Dragon's Lair Authentic CD-ROM? Well, folks, I'm going to read to you right off the back of the CD, and then I'll tell you what they've actually delivered on their promises. Dragon's Lair now completely arcade accurate. This is the first truly arcade-perfect version of the classic Dragon's Lair. Remastered with stunning MPEG-1 video quality, the beautiful Don Bluth animation can be played full screen or within an authentic arcade cabinet window. And then it goes on with the standard, you control the actions of Dirk the Daring, blah, blah, blah. Original arcade look and feel in every move. Original scoring scheme. Arcade circuitry controlled through software dip switches. Multiple levels of difficulty. Total scene authentication. A, quote, watch preview or watch feature to view without playing, and historical interviews with the creators. That's what they promise on the Dragon's Lair Authentic CD-ROM. This is a PC CD-ROM. It does not require a DVD-ROM drive. It plays on a standard computer with a standard CD-ROM drive. So, let's start off with looking at the Dragon's Lair Authentic CD-ROM. What's right about this product? Well, what's right about this product is it'll pretty much play on just about any box. The system requirements are very low. I can take it to my P2450, my wife's computer, slap it in there, fire it up, and it looks and plays exactly as Digital Leisure intended. The MPEG-1 video is pretty good as long as you keep it in a window, but of course when you go full screen it kind of, pixelizes out a little bit, but that's what's to be expected from MPEG-1. There is a nice little interface. It's fairly comfortable to use. You use the arrow keys and spacebar, or you can use the joystick to play the game. So that's pretty well done, and it's pretty simple to get into. It's got pull-down menus to handle most of the features of the game, and the price is right. It's not a budgetware title, but it's inexpensive. It's easy to get a hold of, and it's Dragon's Lair. What else do you need, right? It's Dragon's Lair. And of course, it comes from the guys that have basically reinvented Dragon's Lair, Digital Leisure, good friends of mine, who've graciously provided a copy for me to look at. What else does it do right? Well, the arcade cabinet mode is really cool. Basically, it puts a marquee of Dragon's Lair up, the speaker and scoreboard above your video game window, so it actually looks like the front of a Dragon's Lair machine. It shows your lives, the score, how many credits you have, the whole ball of wax. It looks cool. That's a really neat thing, and I saw it at E3, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait for this. Now, you're thinking to yourself, this sounds pretty cool. It sounds all authentic. It sounds like you can go in and change dip switches. It sounds like the authentic Dragon's Lair you'd want. There's a couple of problems, though, folks. I gotta go with my journalistic responsibilities and tell you what's wrong with the title. First thing off the cuff, which really disappointed me, Windows XP and Windows 2000 support is very poor. There are a lot of problems. The authentic arcade cabinet mode, where you can see the speakers and your score and everything, no working under 2K, no working under XP. And for a lot of us who have moved to XP because it's just plain better all-around operating system once you trim all the AOL crap out of it, once you get to that point, basically the only option for you is to play Dragon's Lair in a window. You can switch to full screen mode in 2K and XP, but if you switch back, the video ends up completely out of the window. It looks like a fiasco. It would freak out the regular user. With XP, the new OEM operating system, this is something that Digital Leisure needs to fix and assures me will be fixed in a timely manner. So if you're a Windows 2K person, a Windows XP person, you may want to think twice about this package if these features are of interest to you. Yes, you can play it in a window without a lot of turmoil. You can play it full screen, but when you switch back, expect to see weird stuff. Everything else seems to work properly, however, which is good. The installer actually runs a DOS window, and I'll tell you what, your common Joe likes Install Shield, setup installers. They like to see nice Windows-oriented installers. When they see a DOS window, they start freaking out. Me personally, I don't like seeing DOS windows either, even though I'm a power user and know what's going on. That sort of thing freaks me out. It would have been real easy for the Digital Leisure team to put together a nice little setup installer, free. No, you need to pay $2,000 for Install Shield. Setup's free. Build a nice little installer for it. That would have freaked me out a little bit less. So what about, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, skip all that crap about the aesthetics. Is it an arcade-accurate version of Dragon's Lair or not? That's the question. In terms of gameplay, in terms of scoring, I would be happy to tell you that it is authentic in that respect. Everything seemed right. Like I said, the scoring, how you played the game, everything seemed to be right. There's always been something about it, though, and this has been every version of Dragon's Lair to date. Something's been wrong with it. Something doesn't quite feel right. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I still can't. But I can tell you this version's better than the other versions in that respect, but there's still something that doesn't quite feel right about playing it. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later on when we talk about Daphne. And that's still there. The other thing they did wrong, and I've told them all of this stuff, folks, and they promised to fix all of this stuff. Not being able to remap your keys. I don't like using spacebar for anything. I want to use standard main controls. Arrow keys, left control. You know, everybody has a key configuration. Not being able to change the keys was sort of a mistake on their part. But we'll forgive them. That's pretty minor. As long as the game plays good. Now, when you blow it up to a full screen window, as I said before, the video doesn't look very clean. But again, it's MPEG-1, which is a lot better than the AVI version that came out last time. But, you know, if you want to keep the system requirements low and not require them to have a DVD-ROM drive, then you got to use MPEG-1. You know, it's practical. So that's sort of an overview of the Digital Leisure Authentic CD-ROM version. We're going to surmise everything at the end, so don't think I'm kind of dissing out on it. Let me talk about Daphne, and then we're going to look at the two of them as comparative products. Daphne. What is right about Daphne? Daphne is authentic. There's no way you can avoid it being authentic. Why? Because it uses Dragon's Lair ROMs to play the game. It actually is an emulator, which to date there have been no Dragon's Lair emulators. There have only been simulators, games that were close to Dragon's Lair. Daphne is an emulated project. Everything in Daphne is real. It's actually arcade hardware ROMs controlling the game. In fact, you can actually download different ROM sets if you want to play an easier version of Dragon's Lair, a harder version of Dragon's Lair. There are ROM sets available you can download, and just you know what I'm talking about, right? There's some versions of Dragon's Lair where you can actually play the bridge at the beginning. You don't just run across it. And this varies because of different ROM sets and how different ROM sets were set up. So you basically have your choice of ROM sets you can run in Daphne, which is good. What else has Daphne done right? While Dragon's Lair does allow you to change some things, the authentic CD-ROM version of Digital Leisure, some things via the, quote, software dip switches, it does not let you control all the aspects of Dragon's Lair through dip switches. What am I talking about? I'm talking about things like pay-as-you-go. There were a lot of Dragon's Lairs that were set up that you had to pay 50 cents like every half of the game. You go through half of the game and it says, hey, you're doing good in your quest, now put up another 50 cents if you want to keep playing. Is that important to a consumer who just wants to play Dragon's Lair? No. Is it important to someone like me who is very interested in authentic Dragon's Lair? I want to be able to see what pay-as-you-go looked like. I want to know what sort of options that you had inside of Dragon's Lair. Daphne has all the dip switch settings. So if you want to go in and monkey, put it on free play, whatever you want to do, you can do that inside of Daphne. To me, that makes it more authentic than the Dragon's Lair CD-ROM. Now, according to Digital Leisure, they are going to put the additional dip switch settings into an update for Dragon's Lair CD-ROM Authentic. So hopefully that will be fixed with the Digital Leisure package. To me, that was a very important piece of Daphne, because those are things about Dragon's Lair I didn't know. I've never actually got to open up a Dragon's Lair machine and dink with the dip switches. So that, to me, was important. That is something they did right. Daphne utilizes MPEG-2 videos. So where the hell do you get MPEG-2 videos? Conveniently enough, you can actually rip the MPEG videos, VOBs, off of the Dragon's Lair DVD-ROM from Digital Leisure, You rip those off the CD, off the DVD onto your computer, and you convert them into a format, an MPEG-2 format that Daphne can use. I know what you're thinking. Man, that sounds hard. That sounds complicated. That sounds like a pain in the ass. You're right. It is. But that's the price you pay for authenticity. Now, here's the good part. They're MPEG-2, folks. They look just as good as the Laserdisc, which means you're not limited to a windowed version of Dragon's Lair. You're not limited to a stretched, pixelated version of Dragon's Lair. You get the full meal deal, and it looks good. Now, with that being said, let's look at what's wrong with Daphne. Well, you've already picked up on part of it. It's not an easy process, folks. If you don't have some time to kill, if you're not intimate with your PC, you can hang Daphne up right now, because you're not going to get that puppy going. There are some turnkey solutions floating around the net, which I'm not going to tell you where they're at. That would be unethical. But there are turnkey solutions that allow you basically to download 2 CDs, stick a disc in, hit setup, and it will copy the entire thing to your hard drive without any setup from you. You just click it, run, and you play. But that's illegal, folks. That's piracy. If you have the original Dragon's Lair DVD-ROM, then you're legally in your right to do this. If not, hey, I'm not your papa, okay? You've got to deal with it on your own. I'm telling you, I'm not going to tell you where to get this stuff because it's illegal. But let's just say that there are turnkey solutions for Daphne floating around. If you look hard enough, you'll probably find them. But is this an average consumer thing? Is Joe Schmuckatelli going to go out and make Daphne run? Hell no. If you're a casual user, you don't care about dip switch settings, you might as well just go ahead and run with Dragon's Lair, the authentic CD-ROM, because that is the package for you. Daphne also, the other thing that's wrong with Daphne is it does require some system power, folks. The CD-ROM version of Dragon's Lair, the authentic CD-ROM version, will run on just about anything. I mean, it's pretty light in the system requirements department. Daphne is not. In fact, Daphne will run, but it ain't happy, on a P2450. But it's slow. Decompression time is slow. Time between scenes is slow. On my P3866, runs good. But there's another factor about Daphne you have to take into consideration. Daphne uses a special display overlay mode with the emulator to produce a good MPEG-2 playback. This is not friendly on a lot of cards, folks. There's a lot of cards that were designed to do this sort of thing, and there are a lot of cards that weren't. If you don't have a nice top-of-the-line card, if you don't have a nice GeForce 2, 32 meg, or a real nice high-end TNT2, then you may not consider Daphne to be a viable alternative. If the playback is horrible, jerky, slow, and it uses a special mode on the video card, folks. So it's not like just because you have the latest card, it's going to have that support built into it. The website, which of course will be listed with the show, has what cards they recommend for use. Now, I use GeForce 2 in both of my computers. GeForce 2 on a P2450 gets you by. It's not pleasant, but it gets you by. GeForce 2 on my P3866, smoking. I can play Dragon's Lair perfectly. Let's get to wrapping this up, folks. I didn't mean to run the show so long. Let's look at the end results here. Dragon's Lair Authentic CD-ROM versus Daphne. If you've got a high-end machine with a decent video card, you've got some time to kill, and you are interested in absolutely the most perfect emulated experience of Dragon's Lair you can, and by the way, Daphne also does Space Ace, Cliffhanger, a bunch of other games. If that's what you're into, and you own a legal copy of Dragon's Lair DVD-ROM, Daphne is your product. You got to get into this because you will just be amazed. Daphne's the first Dragon's Lair version I've ever played that actually feels 100% accurate. If, however, you don't really care about pay-as-you-go dip switch settings, you don't care that it doesn't run right under XP or Windows 2000, if you've got a lower-end box, if all you want's the damn game, Dragon's Lair Authentic CD-ROM will tide you over just fine. In fact, I recommend it. especially if you don't have the box horsepower to run Daphne, because Daphne's a real pain if you don't have that kind of horsepower. Okay, folks, I've ran this episode into the ground. My apologies. We'll try to keep it shorter next time. Next episode, we're going to bring back the flashback. We're hopefully going to have an interview for you, some more rants. We're going to review some more product. I got some more stuff here. We're going to look at Mad Dog McCree from Digital Leisure. Very exciting for once we get a non-linear Laserdisc game to look at. We're going to have a bunch of more of those coming too from Digital Leisure soon, so we'll look at those. I'm hoping to have a preview copy of Intellivision Rocks by next time, and maybe we're going to review a couple of new Lynx games too. So, until next time, this is Shane R. Monroe from Retro Gaming Radio. Until next time, keep it retro.